more of a fallout from the season. And to help us with that, our Sactown Sports Kings insider, Brenden Nunes. Brenden, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Jason. I'm doing all right. Allergies are kind of kicking my butt, so excuse any sort of hiccups in the voice, but I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm good. Is that just a springtime thing? Because I think people who have not been in Sacramento say, I came to Sacramento, I got allergies. It's kind of hit everybody. So you just get them now in the spring or what?
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely one of the most extreme ones I've had. I think I might be getting slightly sick as well. It's hard to gauge the line
Yeah.
between the two, so somewhere in the middle, but I'm doing
Okay.
all right. I think
What
the thing that made me feel the worst was probably watching that Kings Mavericks game.
the second quarter? Second quarter did us all in, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you let up 44 and don't even reach 20 on your own. Pretty disappointing way to go out, but
Yeah.
honestly, I thought it was fairly representative of their entire season.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't shocking. We'd seen it. I mean, not maybe it with the level of importance of game, but that wasn't like an outlier. We go, oh, you just had one bad quarter at the wrong time. That we'd seen that, Brenden, plenty of times.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we wouldn't have been surprised with that outcome, or we're not surprised with that outcome, and we wouldn't have been surprised if they would have won by 20. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just the reality of the variance that took place with this team, and I think that speaks to just how they're built. And I've said for a while, I think that they very much are a collection of talent rather than a cohesive group. And I think the challenge that you have to figure out this offseason is which of your top guys are going to stick around and how can we properly complement them and put them in spots where they just are fully optimized to their talent levels. Because I don't think the core of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis, and if you want to throw Malik Monk, Keegan Murray in there, like I just do not think that they are a cohesive group that are beneficial to one another while sharing the floor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that group will win games, just not enough, or do what they did. They'll have some games you're like, man, that's impressive, and then other games you go, what is this? So, what in your mind is the fix? And I don't think there's a clear path where everyone goes, this is what I would do. I think everybody's got a differing opinion. I will take your opinion on that. What would you do? What would be the quickest? Well, not even quickest. What do you think the best course of action should be to kind of solidify or clean up that core going forward?
Yeah, if we're going fully resetting, not an option, which we all think that is very much a case. I think there's a middle ground where you go get guys on like their second contract, or at the end of their rookie deal, where you could probably still be just about as competitive of a 40-win team, but then, still have more of an upside moving forward. Like, honestly, Chicago's the one that just got rid of Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso, and that's where they got Josh Giddey in that deal. But going and getting a Josh Giddey, and how fun was the end of their season, despite ending in similar fashion to the Kings. But there's optimism because of Josh Giddey and what Kobe White and Matas Buzelis can bring to that team. When LaVine was first on the table, there was a lot of Michael Porter Jr. talk. And while there's questions there, I think my big thing for the Kings is they need to figure out a way to improve their ceiling. And I think that MPJ could play into that. The Zion conversation is very intriguing to me. And like Domantas Sabonis and Zion Williamson could not be more polar opposite players. But again, I lean more towards they need to figure out how they are going to improve their ceiling. And I kind of think that means taking some risky swings if you're not willing to reset.
I know yesterday at the exit interviews, there was a couple references to needing a point guard. And there's a couple thoughts there. One, you had a really good one, maybe the best one you've ever had. And that's okay. You make trades, you move on. But they didn't really replace De'Aaron with a true point guard. You've had Zach play some. You've had DeRozan handle the ball. But Keon and Malik have done it. Would that be an area of immediate need or look for you as far as helping improve that ceiling?
Definitely immediate need. If Domas is comfortably saying that in front of the microphone, I think that he feels pretty strongly about that need. And I think it's something that they're going to address. Now, I've seen people mention like Tyus Jones. I forget which one of our great shows I was listening to the other day, but they pointed out that, hey, Phoenix needed a point guard as well, and they went and got Tyus Jones, and that didn't exactly solve the problem. Like, I do think that we need somebody a little bit higher caliber than that from the Kings' perspective, and I think there's going to be Trae Young conversations. Scott Perry has previous quotes of being very interested in the player that LaMelo Ball is, which if you were still keeping DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. I think the irony there of not fully going Bulls West, but let's just get a different ball brother. I thought that would be pretty funny, but I think that we're going to have Trae Young conversations. If John Morant is sort of dangled around by Memphis, then I think that the Kings would entertain that. So I think that has to be one of the key aspects that we're talking about here, because clearly just fully running your offense through Domas wasn't the most ideal thing for this collection of talent. Malik Monk, not a traditional point guard, even though they tried to mold him into that. Keon, Devin, more combo guards, which I laugh at a little because I said that term the other day, and they're like, are they really combos if they're not the point aspect as well? I'm like, fair enough. So I very much think that is probably priority number one for this team.
Where do you think they target to improve that? As far as you talked about the existing core of Domas, LaVine, DeRozan, let's lump in Malik and Keon. And Keegan. To improve that ceiling, I can't imagine that 5 is all back. So some are probably easier to trade. Some might be more difficult. What do you think would be some of the chips they may be looking to move from that group?
I'm expecting DeMar DeRozan to probably end up on another team. Getting a feel for his league-wide value is kind of weird. Obviously, Kings fans will remember they just acquired him it was a sign and trade, but Harrison Barnes, who wasn't exactly the most coveted asset, I would say, at the time, even though obviously solid player, decent value. But I don't think you're getting something amazing. I think when it comes down to it, well, and also I'm kind of keeping tabs on if Domantas Sabonis ends up wanting to be here. Obviously, Amick had that reporting. I've heard questions about how his relationship with Doug Christie may have continued to develop as the year has played out, and it seemed leaning towards Doug sort of getting that job. So something I'm keeping tabs on there. But when it comes down to it, I think it's going to be one of these core guys that we're talking about potentially too. And you're probably going to have to add draft capital if we're talking about a LaMelo Ball, a Trae Young, or a John Morant, and the Kings have their own draft picks ahead of them outside of whatever may happen with this Atlanta pick. They still have plenty of draft capital available. They have a 2027 unprotected first from the Spurs, the 2031 unprotected first from the Minnesota Timberwolves, potentially the most valuable draft asset they have, probably outside of like their own 2031 first, because I think that the Kings first rounders got more valuable throughout the course of this season. I guess there's a silver lining in all of that. But I think that I'm very much expecting there to be conversations about DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, and I mean Malik Monk could fall into that category. I think that he's a great 6-man, but if you have Zach LaVine, you'd rather have. That's not. I'm trying to think the best way to say this. Malik pointed out yesterday that he felt most comfortable at the starting 2 guard. That is Zach LaVine's spot, and so that just naturally leads to maybe you're entertaining that. I think the 2 for me is I'm expecting Keegan to probably remain around, but this isn't the front office that picked him either. So it's very hard to gauge, but long way of saying I think they're going to shop Domas, DeMar, and you're probably going to have to include some draft capital if you're bringing back a high caliber point guard.
How about any other takeaways that you had from yesterday's exit interviews? A bunch of players spoke, shared their thoughts. Anything that stood out to you as a kind of a universal takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny to start with this, I guess, but it was interesting to hear Jake LaRavia say that he wants to remain in Sacramento, and he was happy with the way that this played out. Obviously, kind of bearing the lead that we already mentioned of Domas mentioning, hey, I think we need a point guard. And he said he wants to be somewhat involved in the decision-making process, which is kind of interesting considering, he was one of the reasons that Mike Brown is no longer in place. And so it feels like that's already been going on, and you wonder if he's unhappy. The Malik Monk thing was interesting as well, because it seemed like he wanted that starting point guard spot. And then now he's saying, hey, I had to play 4 different roles this year, but I'm most comfortable at the starting 2. And so that was a weird aspect to all of this for sure. But I think overwhelming, like DeMar DeRozan, what he had to say probably stood out to me personally the most, just hearing him reflect on, hey, I don't have that much time left in the NBA. He points out that, like, we can do this job, Jason, you and I, as long as we want. They have a time limit. And DeMar very much feels that. And it makes you feel for him, man, because while the fit wasn't great, I think it's wrong to blame that on DeMar DeRozan and expect DeMar DeRozan to be a different player than he's been through his 17 years, where he's top 25 all time in NBA scoring. So I think that interesting comments from Domas and Malik, but more than anything, DeMar really tugs at the heartstrings a little bit, and you can't help but feel for him there.
Well, you mentioned the decision making. There's a different decision maker. Well, we believe, right? There's been reports that, how much did Monty make some of these decisions? Well, we know he is no longer going to be making any of them. He is out. Scott Perry is in. That was quick, right? I mean, Brenden, the loss was so tough to watch, and then within moments, kind of the whole story shifted because the Kings were going to be looking for a new GM. Scott Perry is here. What do you think about that decision, and really how much say he will have?
The latter part is more so what I'm worried about, to be honest. I've heard good things about Scott Perry. I haven't personally interacted with him at all, but a lot of talks to what I'm sure you can remember as well, Jason, of his time here previously, that he brought a level of respect and connections to this organization that, to be fair, I think that Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox already had at that point as well. And I'm a little hesitant to hear people hype up the Zach Randolph and George Hill signings. And there's another one in there that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but those didn't exactly turn out to be the greatest things. Even if they were players that previously maybe would not have considered coming to the Kings at their current point. So I think that he can be promising. It's just extremely hard to gauge, like, honestly, with everything of this team, of what is his decision versus what is ownership's decision. And I do worry about the process of how this all played out, because the counter I've heard to that is, say, well, they've known for a while they're going to move on from Monty, so they've been having this process in the background. I'm like, well, if you've known that, then why did you let that guy trade your franchise player? And maybe you didn't. Maybe ownership was just the one that traded him. But it's an extremely tough formula that I'm sure that you are even more accustomed to dealing with than I am. But it makes it so hard to gauge all of this, right? And I can't help but worry that Vivek is putting people in place that are okay with listening to him. And I just believe that go through an entire process, let people pitch this to you. I thought Dave had a great point of, you're missing out on free information by not just going through this entire interview process with guys, and hire a guy you trust and let them do it. Now, I'm not saying don't be involved. That's ridiculous. You own this team, but they are in this spot getting paid to do this because this is what they do. And this is not exactly your specialty. So I would just say back up a little bit in certain aspects, and I think it could be beneficial. So if he's given full reign, I am hopeful for how that would play out. And I think that the early years, you're more prone to seeing that be allowed, like we did with Monty.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. Brenden Nunes joining us, Sactown Sports Kings insider. I know there was a lot of conversation yesterday from the players, seemingly support, and I know likely you're going to hear that when Doug is still the coach at the time being, but I felt like a lot of players did kind of go out of their way to talk about Doug and what he has done and the job he has done and what he's meant to them. What do you think about his future? You think he gets this job as head coach of the Kings?
I very much do. I think it's sort of already lined up that Doug is going to be getting this job, which worries me a little bit. I will say, like, as long as Scott Perry's on board, I feel like part of the issue for years was GM and head coach not being on the same page, this vertical and horizontal alignment. And so, hey, if Scott Perry's all for that, then great. And I am hopeful about Doug. I think that you can never question how much Doug is trying or how much he wants it for this city. I just wonder about the experience, obviously, that kind of comes with being in this role. So I very much think Doug is going to get that job. I think there are guys that are big fans of there. Hey, Jake LaRavia is coming out there and saying he'd be really happy if Doug kept this job. So maybe that's all Scott Perry needs to hear, Jason. No, I think that Doug is going to get this job. I think that he, ownership is a big fan of what Doug Christie has done, and it'll be interesting to see how he builds out the rest of his staff around him.
Yeah.
Because there's a weird aspect here of, well, you want to get really qualified guys for the bench, but then all of a sudden is your assistant more qualified to be your head coach than your head coach is. And we all know the weird dynamic that could create. So I think that's a weird aspect that's got to be ironed out here as well.
All right, and our final thought here with you, Brenden. Playoffs start tomorrow. We know the Kings aren't going to be involved in that, but after tonight's last two play-ins, we'll have the field set. Who would you pick? Who are you picking to represent the West and the East?
Well, I think the Celtics are going to win a couple in a row, to be honest. And I'm sure people won't love me for that. On the West side, I wish that the Clippers and Thunder could meet in the Western Conference Finals, but I'll go ahead and say that whoever wins that matchup, I think will go to the finals. I love the Clippers and admittedly have loved the Clippers for years now as a team and picked them to go to the finals way too many times. And for some reason, I'm falling for it again. But I think that defense is very legit. Ty Lue, one of the best coaches in the league. Lakers, I still think, have some things to kind of figure out as well. And not that they're not talented and that bottom side of the West can't do it. But I think that it's going to be the Thunder or Clippers and meeting the Celtics in the finals.
Wow. No Cavs. Well, you did mention the Thunder there last, but yeah, okay. We shall see how it goes. It'll be fun. I know there'll be a lot more drama that you'll be following regarding the Kings. Brenden, keep up the great work. We'll tell everybody to read your stuff on sactownsports.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it, Jason.
All right, thank you. That's Brenden Nunes. Break time for us. We'll come back. We'll kind of do our final part of our exit interviews